Quyle Kilns is turning 70 this year. Thanks for checking out the latest episode of the Sierra Lodestar. I'm your host, Jason Currier. I was able to chat with Pamela Quyle of Quyle Kilns about how her family originally came to Calaveras County. She also had a fun story about how the man that her father bought the 150 acres from came to Calaveras County himself all the way from New York City. New York City? And Pamela also gives us a tour of some of the 27 printing presses her father collected over his lifetime. She also shows us the original etching for the Big Trees logo designed by her sister. And it's all coming up right now on this episode of the Sierra Lodestar. If you could, please click subscribe, and don't forget to click that little notification bell to receive notification when we post our new stuff.
So, I love to tell the story about how my family got to Calaveras County. And it goes back a little ways. And if you've ever been to the Big Tree State Park, you've seen that there was a time when they stripped the bark off of the big tree and they sent it around to the World's Fair in 1896. Well, there was a man in New York City whose name was Durant Bryce, and he was a Shakespearean actor. And he saw that bark at the World's Fair in 1896 and was so amazed that he left New York and by hook or crook made it out to California and then by horse up to Calaveras County, and then he pitched a tent where the Big Tree State Park is now, and lived there for a winter.
Wow.
And then he was able to, the story as we know it is that he saved the life of a very well-known prominent woman in the community. And her family gifted him with a section of land as a thank you gift. So he ended up with a section of land which is now, would include Forest Meadows and our property, Northwood Drive and Jarby's, and so on. And he ran a logging operation. Then where the highway is now, there were artesian springs, and he dug out big ponds for his logging operation. And he hired families of Miweks who lived on the property. And then the fellows would go out and cut logs with him, cut trees down, and the ladies of the families would help pick up the slash. And then the children needed to go to school, so eventually he built a schoolhouse, which was on a sledge, and it was pulled around from area to area by a 6 oxen team. And so they would move the schoolhouse from this side of the road to that side of the road to up there, just depending on where the families were working.
The mobile school just fascinates me.
Peppermint School, named after the Peppermint Creek, which runs down through what's now Forest Meadows and was a tributary to the Murphy's Angels Creek. So he lived on the property until he passed in his 90s. My grandfather ended up busting a mass murdering train robbery group on fingerprints. He got reward money and decided to move and retire in Murphy's. So we used the reward money from that bust to buy 150 acres from Mr. Bryce. So we built then a house and a horse barn in the 40s. And then my grandparents gifted to my parents a house, a horse barn, 100 acres, and a babysitter if they wanted to quit their teaching jobs and move up here and start a pottery. And they went with that. And so we cut the logs off of our property. My mother and her college friend poured all the concrete while my granddad mixed.
Wow.
PG&E wouldn't put power until the building was completed because they thought no one would have a business as high in the Sierras.
Right.
So we didn't have power, so everything, all of the log section went up with 2 mules and a block and tackle.
Wow.
And so the section was built with hand saws and hand tools.
No kidding.
And then we added on a little bit more and a little bit more as time went on.
And what year was the main building built?
We had the horse stalls were put in 43. But then we added this log section for my parents' first studio in 1954, 55. We got the roof on in 55.
Gotcha. And then this section wasn't added until...
This section we added in 85 and did it in the style of the Mother Lode. And it's all solid concrete block and red brick.
So that's why you do number one, that's why you call it Bryce Station.
Bryce Station is because that's the historical name of this area.
And that's why you do the Shakespeare, because it was...
One of the reasons.
Gotcha.
Yeah, just kind of a nice coincidence.
Right.
Yeah, and then we put the winery in 93 after the old Gulch fire and leveled property. But luckily our buildings survived because they're all stone and metal roofs.
Right.
So we put the vineyard in, and that just seemed like the logical name for our vineyard,
Right.
as it was the traditional name for this land.
Right. And you said Mr. Bryce was quite the actor.
He knew every word that Shakespeare ever wrote by heart. And he would do recitations in the 1920s, in the 1930s, 1940s, and he lived up until the early 50s. And he would be in every Murphy's gathering, speaking the bard.
Wow. How fun.
Quite a nice guy.
Well, that's a nice little tip of the cap to him then, to have the Shakespeare here and call it Bryce Station. And yeah, I like that. Excellent.
This is, the tiles are done by Don Hall for this piece, and it's a base of his. I'm doing the grapes, and then we're going to do lupin and California poppies,
Wow.
which I think will be fun. And then that pillar was different people from our family of friends here, which is fun. But I hope to do all the walls. It'll just take me a while.
Very, very, very cool.
Step by step.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I've got millennial kids who don't want to own anything, so I figure I'm just going to glue it all to the wall, and they're stuck with it.
Right.
Whatever happens to the building, even if there was a fire,
It's not going anywhere.
it's just below the windows.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, this is
Oh.
into the hillside
Oh.
by 14 feet
Oh.
or so. And there's flying buttresses that go back into the hillside. So even if the roof burned off, this will be fine.
It's not going anywhere. Yeah.
And and then we added this area here, the ceilings, and then the next area is our classroom space.
Oh, okay.
So
Gotcha.
I'm just waiting for them to. And we have kids class here, and then
At big kids class.
a big kids class here.
Wow.
So this was just the loading dock.
Excuse me.
And Daddy fabricated the I-beams for me before he died. So I
Wow.
got the roof on for my mom's funeral, and I got the walls on for my dad's funeral. And
Gorgeous,
anyway,
Sandy.
so there's student work. That's a jiggering area. There's a kitchen and a library on that shed. I just roofed over the sheds.
The other side it looks like waves.
We've got remaindered windows, remaindered this, and just got new doors, new old doors, and so step by step it's turning into something.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
And this is all student area back here.
Yeah, this is Amanda's space now.
The lagoon?
Wow.
Indigo.
But
Very
it's
cool.
It's nice. It's cold in the winter and hot in the summer, but
Yeah, but it's a nice space to.
yeah, nice and light and bright.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
It's fun. A friend of mine from Mountain Ranch made a portrait of each one of my dogs as they passed away.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm a dog guy.
Then I had the tourist who came in and said, "Well, did you taxidermy your dogs?" It's like, really? Who would taxidermy
And just
their
keep the head.
dogs? Okay, no.
No, I didn't.
Jason to come in and check out my dad's print shop, which is a hole in the wall, literally. My father started collecting printing presses back in the 60s, and type would show up in our life and equipment would show up in our life, especially as the school districts quit having any kind of craft that they were teaching. You know, first thing to go was print shop, and then metal shop, and then wood shop. Those things had disappeared. So printing presses literally would show up on our front porch. So there was a point when my father had 27, and I'm trying to winnow that down to 3. That's
Holy
my
moly.
plan anyway. But we have still this little nook that has all of our printing equipment in it, or much of it, and so we have multiple cases of type and illustrations that were done where you would draw a drawing in black and white and then have it transferred in an etching process onto a piece of lead, and then the lead would be mounted onto a piece of hardwood to make it the same height as the other type. So I have boxes and boxes of odd little illustrations from the 10s and 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s and on. There's one here that is the logo for the Big Tree State Park that my sister Dolores drew when she was in high school, and we were doing some printing for them. And so it was a line drawing, once again etched into lead and mounted type high. So I think they're still using the same line drawing that we did way back when.
Wow. That your sister drew at 15.
Drew at 15.
Wow.
And then here's a smaller version of it because they reduced it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very neat.
Yeah. My sisters and I made all of our pocket money printing the dance bids for the high school, prom invitations, wedding invitations, stationery for different companies around, and my father, taught us all how to set type by the time we were 8.
Wow.
So we can all read upside down and backwards.
No, yeah.
And he insisted we do all of the business printing also, so that meant my sisters and I were chained to a printing press every weekend for a period of time, all of our lives. But we lived, so it's fine.
Well, I would imagine you did all the printing around town if Dad had 27 printers.
He didn't use them all, and we would never have business. So it was always just a hobby. There was a professional company in Angels Camp, and they, in fact, then have donated their equipment to the Angels Museum, and they have a very nice printing show or display there of similar equipment to ours.
Right.
But no, Father never really was. He had many hobbies, but he really didn't make a whole lot of living at any of them. It was always just something on the side.
More of a hobby thing.
Yeah, a hobby thing. He was
Right.
good with hobbies.
Right.
Yeah, blacksmithing, photography. Yeah.
Name the hobby, he'd hobby it.
Did it. Yes, yeah. And he liked to master each craft that he was interested in, so he was pretty professional.
Jack of all trades, master of them too.
He was, yes, that was his thing, is he wanted to master each one, not just start it.
Right.
Every year he'd choose a different food item to master. So it's one year it's pie crust, another year it's olives, another year it's bread, another year was some hominy. There's always every year he'd choose a project in cooking also. And so it was either metalworking, printing, there's a wood shop. We kept a boat for 30 years that he was always building on.
Wow.
He liked to be busy.
Wow.
So it was a good thing.
So cool.
Thank you.